Breaking news coverage continues from here in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. And, you know, the story of this war has become an economic story as much as anything else. And much of that story is based here in the Gulf. I want to bring my friend Doug Flynn in from back in New York, the certified financial planner with Flynn Zito Capital Management. As I do so, I'm going to take a second to tell you our story of the day because it'll speak to, just give me a second, Doug, the economic story. So we're here in Dubai, right? And we get out early in the morning, and which is eerie in and of itself because this is a region that's been under fire more than any other, or a country that's been under fire. And people are driving around because the military here has been so effective at shooting down the drones and missiles that there's a feeling of just at least relative safety. It's quiet, but people are getting out. Many are going to work. So we went to where this one guy works. We did an interview with him. You'll hear from him coming up. That's fine. But then I get back to, I was co-hosting the morning show on this network with Marky Martin, and the huge headline was, oil's at like $120 nearly, Brent crude, which is the global benchmark. By the time we got to this show, it was down like almost $25, $30 from there, right? So yes. It was a crazy day is my point in markets, and I'm wondering what you would say about it. I mean, what's going on?
Sure. Well, as the price has gone up and it's been more and more about, you know, is this going to turn into something longer term? I think all along you go in expecting it to be short term because that's what they say. And then as it looks like it may escalate and continue on, that's starting to ramp up. And as it turns to perhaps it is going to last longer or it's going to escalate, then those prices are going up because it turns into the fact that basically for every 10% of a rise in oil prices, that adds about 0.4% to inflation. So, you know, if you have a 50% rise in oil prices, that can add 2% in inflation, and then all of a sudden it becomes an inflation story, and then are people going to be able to spend like they were, and then it turns into some deeper economic issues. At least that's the thought. And then part of the reason why it turned around greatly is because Trump came out and said that the war is over pretty much. I don't know what pretty much means, but that's all of a sudden you could see right to it. Then all of a sudden the prices come back down. Maybe it's true. It's not going to last as long as we just thought earlier this morning is basically how it went today.
You know, it's interesting. I have this graph. I'll put it up on the telestrator here about supply shocks over the years. And this is different if you look at it from this perspective, at least the oil barrels removed from the global market by a conflict. So I remember, you know, for example, when Russia invaded Kuwait, that was, you know, when Russia invaded Ukraine, that was Eastern Europe covering the refugee crisis at the time everybody was talking about. But look at this, small, right, compared to what we're seeing now. Huge, even compared to Iraq. Kuwait, in Iraq, Iran, the Iranian Revolution in the late 70s, all of it pales in comparison and compared to the total barrels removed from the global market. So in that regard, this one is pretty serious. Is there any context or caveats you would
I think so. Add? Yeah, I would say, you know, if you look back to like, okay, oil embargo 1973 to 74, you had oil prices go up 4 times, you know, 400%. And even 79, 80, they doubled. And so we were much more reliant on oil from the Persian Gulf at that time. As you probably know, we're now a net exporter of oil. And so, you know, it's less of an impact to us. But at the end of the day, what they did here in Iran was choke off the Strait of Hormuz. And that's where a lot of this comes from. If you actually shut that down for any length of time, it's going to have a material impact because all of the other countries that produce, whether it's Kuwait, UAE, all these other countries, they only have so much storage facilities available. If they keep producing and they can't get rid of it and they can't store it, what are they going to do? So part of the reason also this happened is because they had to clamp down on their production, and that's also why the price rose. So getting that back open, and they're trying to do that, is part of the reason why you see that number, how much greater it is relative to the other more recent conflicts, because it didn't have that much of an impact on that strait. It wasn't a total shutdown for any length of time.
Yeah, some reports that ships are going through by turning their transponders off. I don't think that's a long-term solution to all this, but maybe like Emmanuel Macron suggesting today that the Europeans might take part in an escort, getting the ships through there. Maybe that's part of something. Maybe we'll see something in the coming days. The president seemed to hint at that. For people, though, watching the price at the pump go up, I know it didn't go up as much last week as the oil price, but it probably would if prices keep going up, end up going up as much as that. What do you tell them about the way down? Like, will they stay elevated for some time? Because, you know, the old saying, it seems to go up faster than it comes down, or at least people feel that way.
It sure does feel like that. And part of that is because the companies are hedging and they're trying to lock in prices and doing what they can, and they can only do it to a certain extent or for so long, or the oil that's already in there. And that tends to happen. The oil they've already bought, they're going to jack up the price, but the next batch they might have to buy at a higher price. So that's why it seems to take longer on the way down. But yeah, I think you can expect that with these prices, it's going to be correlated to it, and it's going to continue to bump up. But if this does end quickly, as they keep saying it's going to, and there'll be other spikes. It went down, and I'm sure there'll be something else in the next couple of days that'll spike it back up. It's going to remain elevated for a short period of time. But yes, I mean, there's nothing on the horizon that says that even with this, that we're going into a full-fledged recession, or stagflation is even being thrown out today. That would warrant a much higher, longer-term price. I think if we don't get that, you are going to settle back down, and it can take a little bit of time, 1 to 2 months, if everything ends fairly quickly. So you kind of deal with it and know that we'll be on the other side of it. In the long run, those are not going to disrupt the longer-term impact of the U.S. economy.
That's interesting you say. I was debating whether to bring up either recession or stagflation or both, but you don't think either is a serious concern, because you're right, people have been throwing it out.
Yeah, I mean, look, so stagflation, for people that don't know, it's you have to have elevated inflation, which could come from this, and then you have to have really slower economic growth, and then a increase in unemployment for an extended period of time. That's a tall order. So I think they're stretching. Look, if what happened earlier this morning continued and it became a longer protracted thing, you could look at maybe a recession and then perhaps that down the road. I don't see that. Look, anything is possible, but I think the probabilities are very, very slow, certainly on stagflation. But even a recession, even with a spike in oil prices, it's not enough to move us back in lower GDP, to make us negative for 2 quarters, if we want to use that definition for a recession. I think we'll be able to weather through that and get on the other side of this. At least that's how it looks right now, but it's day to day, as you know.
It is day to day. I mean, that's the whole point. It's like today, there are signs, and we've talked about some of them. And the other one I would add from here, again, it's not just because we're here, but there have been more missiles and drones coming into the UAE than anywhere else, and there were far fewer today. Like, it was a dramatic decline. Now, what does tomorrow bring? Might go up again. Maybe Iran's changing strategy, or maybe, to the point we've heard from many on the show today, they're running out of steam or running out of gas. We don't know. Doug, thank you. Doug Flynn joining us today.